We'll give people a couple of minutes. So we have who we have. I got messages that VinCat and Dan couldn't make it. So let's all right. So topic I had was basically let's go over the Red Hat feedback on the strategy exploration. Simon, if that's all right.
Yes, Joe, of course.
Do you want to share? Or do you want me to share?
If you have it, that would be slightly faster, so I can bring it up.
Yeah, I have it up. All right, so I'll share. We'll go over that. Um, all right. I guess walk us through the main point, Simon.
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, as you know, we had the strategy meetings over the past few weeks, and then I took that information to my colleagues, and so although this document has my name at the front of it, it's basically their feedback. Um, So the way that I structured this was I went through the slides and then I wrote for each of the main points a summary of it, and that appears in the document. And that was for the benefit of my colleagues, and then they provided feedback which I've edited.
Okay.
Um, so that's kind of the format of the document. The Nginx. So the basic feeling here is that the overall feeling is that the concern that the scope is too large, and that we would be more comfortable with a more limited scope that essentially focused on just bringing up the basic platform. So for Nginx, it's not that it's a bad idea, it's just that it goes beyond that scope, is our feedback. Um,
Okay. All right. So presumably, the okay. So focus on bringing the bring up. Okay. So let's go through and see what that actually means.
yeah, exactly.
No problem.
I would just
Yeah.
mention that there's one point missing from this slide, which is the PCIe topic, and that is because we had no feedback on that. So I assume that means we're okay with it. Um, Yeah, so we talked a lot about the models, which kind of boils down to is the model part of this, is the DPU IP part of the server, or is it a separate entity that happens to be co-located physically? And we concluded that in general, I think there was consensus that most people prefer the model where it's in an independent server inside the host. And yeah, we agree. This is how we see it too. We see that such a model maximizes opportunities for openness. The host, of course, can manage the DPU in such a model, but it doesn't have any special privileges. It has to be given some kind of token or whatever to give it access to do so. Yeah, the next point, we talked quite a bit in our meetings about a clearinghouse for information about essentially physical aspects of the bring up, cabling in particular. Yeah, from Red Hat perspective, we would basically think that our customers have that under control. So I guess there was a little bit surprise amongst my colleagues that OPI felt this was within scope. Which I know I understand is contrary to what we discussed at the meetings, because there was quite a lot of time spent on this topic. But basically in a nutshell, we would feel that our customers have the expertise to bring the equipment into production at that physical level.
So, anyone have a comment on that? The only comment I have on that is sufficiently large customers do develop that expertise, typically by direct interaction with the hardware vendor. So they learn how to do it from the hardware vendor themselves because they're buying enough stuff that the hardware vendor is willing to invest the time and effort in them to teach them. Others seem to have a much more difficult time. For example, the experiment that the stuff that's been done even for our proof of concepts, where otherwise knowledgeable people have a challenge, which is why this got discussed. That's an interesting trade-off.
So I guess, yeah, I guess the thing is that for Red Hat, speaking strictly from a Red Hat perspective, we would view ourselves as dealing with the first category of users. And I suppose I think that the implication of this for OPI from a Red Hat perspective is perhaps investing time in this might distract from other efforts. As I said at the beginning, we're really interested in having a quite limited scope as an initial milestone so that we can all focus on that and achieve that milestone.
I don't disagree with that one. I do think that someone needs to figure out how to streamline the physical bring up of these cards. I've got pretty good access to both the server vendors and the silicon vendors, and it has been in the past. It's getting better, but in the past it has been a finger pointing game. Well, go talk to your server vendor. No, go talk to your card vendor. Go talk to your server vendor. Talk to your card vendor. There's no one place to get that information, and these cards are expensive enough that just experimenting with cables to figure out if it works or fries the card isn't something I've been willing to do. So
no, of course not. I appreciate it, and I'm sure that if I tried to do it in my own lab, I would feel exactly the same way.
Exactly the same way, yeah. And so I don't. I think that is needed. I don't disagree with your statement that it increases the scope and may distract us from actually getting a more useful thing done.
Yeah, that is essentially the point we're trying to make here. Certainly, we don't see any problem with information being available.
Right, but I can see the point that it might distract us from doing something more useful.
Yeah, thank you. That is the point. Yeah. Do you want to go to the next page, Joe?
But if I could make a comment on that.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
This kind of comes up in the context of OPI was sort of, part of OPI was to encourage the development of an ecosystem and a multi-vendor open ecosystem,
Yes, definitely.
and to enable, ease of adoption. And that this work here does do that. That's what it would be there for.
Okay.
And it could be done as more of an ad hoc thing, which says that, hey, these are cards we worked with in our POCs. Let's record that information and make it available. That doesn't mean we're going to proactively go out and try to cover every server card vendor combination, right?
Yep.
We don't have
Yep.
to sign up for a complete set. We can just publish the matrix of what we've worked with as, hey, these are things we know work.
The challenge we discussed there is, of course, is that much of the information on how to even physically install a card is under NDA, which seems a little bit insane to me.
Yep.
But because again, if you're trying to sell the cards and you make how to actually put them in a server and use them NDA, that I mean, that's never made sense to me. So Tim, I agree with
Answers the question, Joe. We can't do this because the information is secret.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's true, I mean, we're sort of blocked, right, by the vendors themselves. So.
Yeah, what we were not speaking to my slide here, but what we did discuss at the meeting was a mechanism to try to break that deadlock, that precise issue. But I want to just make it clear that I'm in no way saying that that OPI should do things only for Red Hat. I'm just presenting out.
No, we appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good perspective, and understanding it is useful. I mean, I think okay. So, all right, let's keep going. This one's going to be a particular. You're right. This will run into a particular kind of challenge. So I kind of agree with part of the assessment. But if we don't attempt to do this, I think we can't build that ecosystem, as Tim says, if we don't try to do this.
Mm-hmm. And I think that point's well made, because the ecosystem is very important to us, as it is to all of us, right?
That's right. Okay. All right. Let's go to.
Okay, discovering an inventory. Let's see. So firstly, it was pointed out to me after I sent this that redfish is not the capitalization is wrong. So sorry about that. So essentially, our feedback here is that redfish is the right way to go. We believe that it can serve all of the needs. The second point is a little bit of detail that we might be able to misuse some of the things for our own purposes. That was from Julia. She can speak to it in more detail if you want to ask her about it. I think.
Why would you consider this a misuse of the?
I don't think it's a general misuse. I think she was getting at when you dig into it a little bit, perhaps there's something you need to do that isn't exactly matching the specification, but you can find something close enough.
So you overload some API and you can get it done.
No. Well, so redfish, one of the more complex and potentially useful things in redfish is every model can be extended with quote vendor extensions. So if we found something missing if we took the redfish view and drove that all the way as the way to do this set of things, we could use the vendor extension.
Sure. Right. That is true. I guess what she was getting at is that you may not even need to go that far in some cases.
Right.
And another point I didn't write down is that she pointed out it's perfectly valid to only implement a subset of redfish.
Oh yeah, that's certain. If you just implemented system, it would be kind of useless. But you don't have to do very much implementation to have a useful a useful API.
Yeah, exactly. So we feel pretty strongly that Redfish is a very good fit here. Yeah, the networking stack. Yeah, I wrote a lot of words here. I'll see if I can summarize it real quick. So firstly, we will be working towards an OVS OVN solution. So obviously we would like something that can fit into, but I mean, we feel that that's just the implementation that you should be able to plug other implementations in, and they should be able to provide what the user needs. So I was I was trying not to be wordy, but we would like OVS OVN, but we don't see it as the only option. What we do propose is to have a layered approach to the APIs, such that people who are implementing OPI solutions, for example, Red Hat, can select which of those APIs they need to implement. But of course, there's a difference between the API and the implementation, right? And on the topic of the NOS, I wrote a lot of words about this. We felt kind of strongly that basically this doesn't really match where we want to go. What we would like to do is to have containers as the unit that people bring their workloads. And if the if an NOS can be such a thing, then that's fine. But otherwise, we feel that this is not the direction we want to go with from an openness point of view.
So
I don't know that this really. I feel that this is kind of really adding detail to what we discussed at the
yeah, but
meeting, or to the point where in agreement with some of the discussions there, and we just want to make it clear which parts we would prefer to stay clear of.
yeah, and so the conclusion would be, don't say anything about network operating system at all, basically, other than the fact that you can put one if that's a desirable application. And
Yes.
and the hooks to support that network operating system are either in whatever Linux installation you choose, or well, they're in the underlying Linux installation, or you have to implement a Psi library and bring it out yourself because your DPU chip is able to be Psi-ified. I guess I would say you're able to provide that Psi implementation for, say, Sonic to use.
Yes.
And
Yes. Exactly.
and all of that is then how that works is out of scope for OPI is the recommendation.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. The only reason I mentioned NOS in this document is because we discussed it at the meetings. Otherwise, I would have left it out entirely.
Right. And and that means then if I want to treat, okay, so the trade-off there is if I want to treat the DPU as a layer 3 endpoint, that I don't have a common way to do that. So, I mean, and we weren't, okay, in the API working group, it's true, we weren't really able to drive for a common API anyway. But, you know, I think a lot had made the point, and I agree with him that I actually agree with him that having a set NOS has value in a bigger system because you know exactly what you're dealing with from the point of view of building, the end-to-end solution, right? And you know how that thing operates, you know how to interact with it, you know how to set up your BGP sessions, you know what it can do for tunneling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was sort of the value, but out of scope for the first release, maybe.
Right.
Anybody have a
How we
opinion?
discussed it was it may have value, but let's focus on the OVS OVN portion first and not on the NOS portion. So
Well, OVS OVN is a NOS basically, just a more limited one.
Well,
yeah,
that's
implemented in something like Kubernetes though. It's instead of having it separate.
yeah, right. So and OVS OVN is an example of the data path, whichever word you want to use, that will be used on a Kubernetes system. I think in the next slide we get onto Kubernetes, but the key point is that you bring your containers and skipping to the next slide, and that they would be managed using Kubernetes.
Right. And so the main reason not to consider NOS is too many different deployments. Oh yeah, customer lock-in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big one. From our point of view, it may sound counterintuitive, but even though Red Hat is a software vendor, we're very much into having open systems and allowing people to compete. And we don't feel the NOS comfortably leads to that outcome.
Huh. Okay.
Telemetry, yeah, this again, we value telemetry and we acknowledge it's important, but we feel that for the first release, this is probably reaching too far.
But even, but I mean, a common, okay, so telemetry, we should probably have broken down into, common method versus like OTEL, which we had already agreed on, but, again, I guess, maybe the agreement was premature versus common data that gets sent out versus common format for that data.
Yeah, I mean, in the meetings we talked in terms of, we need to collect what the common telemetry points are and also determine data. And we talked about this would be appropriate for master student level activity, which I agree. I guess the key thing here is that that's a very nice activity, but perhaps it's not a requirement for the first release.
Well, something like okay, so maybe what we should do is talk about, first, subsequent, never, and use those buckets, because the NOS one, for example, or the hardware installation feedback from you guys are nevers, or not in the foreseeable future. I guess never is too strong. Not foreseeable future, and the trade-off, in Redfish is yes, first. And then
Yep.
something like telemetry, you're making the argument it's subsequent. So first, subsequent, and
Yeah, I think the concern with something like telemetry is that it may take significantly longer than we anticipate. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. To make a 3-layer prioritization would make sense.
But I'm talking there overall in general. Maybe we should think about the overall list that way, and
Yep.
when we go back to it, evaluate it on the basis of first, first, subsequent, and not, not,
Yeah,
not
I,
now,
I,
or maybe at some time in the future, but basically forget about it.
right. So, I mean, this document kind of it's a representation of the output of our discussion, right? And one way to describe it is it has in the order of 10 points, right? I didn't actually count them, but something like that, right? And each point might have subpoints. So we could go through and do an ordering of them, right? That could be another way to present the information, which might be useful for planning purposes.
Yeah, or just an annotation that says, recommend, first, first, subsequent, and no, but we'll put a disclaimer what no means.
Sure. I think that's a good idea. On the application provisioning, as I said just a few minutes ago, for Red Hat our implementation, we're looking towards Kubernetes. So we would like that to be on the list. As for the other ones, Docker, SSH, I guess we don't feel strongly about it, but again, less is better in our opinion, at least upfront. What's the other point here? Yeah, the fleet management part we felt was perhaps out of scope, and a layer also above where Kubernetes sits, which is where we feel the focus is at this time.
So it could be fleet management here. I think we were talking about fleet management of the devices themselves, not fleet management of the applications.
Okay.
Or it could have been we were conflating fleet management of the devices with an OS and an application on it. And making
it could also be that my interpretation of the slides was the course of this. But in any case, it would be good to disambiguate this and state what we mean, right? And from Red Hat's point of view, we feel that it's the applications where the focus should be at this time, from a management point of view, rather than the hardware itself.
So starting with one device and getting one device way up through an application and figuring that workflow out and documenting that and building the framework, and then going back to handle fleet management of hardware and then fleet management of applications of OS and applications.
Yeah, on the larger system. Yeah, I think a bottom-up approach is what you just described, and that's what we would.
Okay.
That's what we're.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Again, like most of these points, I mean, that's not to say that these things aren't all important. But what I'm speaking to is where Red Hat feels the focus should be at this time.
Yeah, of course. Again, no need for disclaimers. This is a good discussion to refine, to help refine the thinking, and having direct feedback like this is really valuable.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. I would just mention as an aside is that the Red Hat Summit is coming up next week. It's not intended to be advertisement, but at which we plan to demo some of the things that we have been working on, which means that they're public, which means I can speak more freely about them.
Good.
Yeah, so the conclusion is just really putting into words what I've already said. We would like to focus on a tight set of requirements. Our focus is on the platform and so on.
Okay, so that would, if I, all right, so I took
Simon, one I'd like to, can we go back to the first slide?
Oh yeah, I can go back.
The first, the one about how far up physical install, discovery and inventory of the card, OS install, and then application. And you seem to stop short of application, or it was just that Nginx wasn't the right application?
So as I understand Nginx, the idea is to do an end-to-end demo, right?
Right.
Which means you need to have various things in place, right?
Yes.
I guess what we're saying is that's more things in place than we would envisage a first milestone.
Okay. So, and
So
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with an application being something other than Nginx. But from my point of view, and I think what we've heard a lot say in the past is what makes these cards interesting is actually having an operating system and an application doing something useful for a customer and showing that.
Yep. I guess I appreciate that point. I guess I guess his views kind of stems from Red Hat's where Red Hat's business lies, which is essentially we create the platform and people build the applications on top of it.
Got it.
So from our point of view, the customers are the people building the applications, not the people consuming the applications, if you like.
Okay.
Right, but if you were going to build an application, it'd be nice to see one running.
Yeah,
And
of course. I'm not just, I'm not saying we shouldn't do such demo. Yeah, it's just what we're trying to say is that might be reaching a little too far this time.
That might be one of the subsequent things, not a
Well,
first.
it's definitely a subsequent thing. It's not a no. It's not a never thing.
And my thought is that we need to, if we don't go that far, there will be gaps, that building block gaps that will be missed, that we need to later go
So
back and fix.
you're saying if you don't exercise this system end to end, how do you know if it works?
Yeah, exactly. That would be my, I mean,
Yeah,
make it Nginx, make it something else, but make it such that you're getting to that point where there's an application running on the DPU in order to find all the cracks and crevices.
yeah, the point isn't that it's Nginx. The point is
Right.
that it's an application.
No, I get it.
Nginx is convenient because it's open source, it's well known, it's well understood, everybody knows what it is. And we're not overreaching in the sense that we're not trying to tap into hardware accelerators or do anything other than run it as an application with a networking interface, right?
Yep.
So I guess the question that my colleague would pose at this point is the Nginx is this a requirement for the minimum thing we can deliver? That's the question. I'm not answering it. I'm asking.
I would argue for a lot that he would say yes.
So
He's
I mean,
made
we
that
don't have
case many times in this meeting. So
Yeah.
right. So I think in general, that is the question we would like asked, or like OPI to ask itself.
yeah, I think it comes back to Paul's point that we have to get to a full application deployment to show that actually we have a full provisioning story, and that actually, you can show something end to end, that you
Yep.
can stand up a bare card and get to an application running on it.
Yep.
And
So I think
people, even if they don't want to consume that as is, they need it as both a proof point
Yep.
as well as an example to do their own deployment and their own application.
okay.
And by doing that,
Right.
we are enabling adoption and ecosystem.
And I would say,
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that we solve the fleet management of applications, just that we find the cracks when trying to install an application and configure it. And then the using the provisioning mechanisms to deploy an application would be a second.
Yeah, and it's key that we're doing it on all the cards. So
Yep.
it's a multi-vendor exercise.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we pose that question to ourselves and we answer the Nginx is in scope. I think that's fair enough. Yeah. I will take it back to my colleagues and get their reaction. But yes, I think the key is to try to ask that question of ourselves and frame what we're doing within the answers to the question.
Yeah, I agree with the conclusion that was just reached. So it was good discussion.
And so in a sense, Red Hat has asked itself that question, and this document represents our answers, but it's up to the OPI to finalize its own answers, right?
Okay, so I took a few notes on the discussion, so I want to look at those and make sure that I haven't said anything that's actually incorrect. So
Thanks, Ray.
the
I
summary,
forgot.
if you will, the gloss of the, but really it's, so again, first point was focus should be, so no feedback on PCI, Scope should be smaller, focused on a bring up. So we had discussion on physical installation being included, and basically it's like your guys' conclusion was okay. And then we had a discussion, and the counterpoint is the discussion basically came down to it's desirable, but much of the installation's under NDA. So our open ecosystems desired, and we left it, we sort of left it at that. I guess we should push on that thread some more and see if we can get the openness the way we described as a kind of a parallel thread. It's not, I mean, again, the physical installation part could be late, I guess, late binding on whether, you go out and talk about it or not. So, maybe it becomes a subsequent thing or whatever. Redfish is the right way to go for software inventory, firmware update, OS install, or update. But may need, Redfish model extension.
So one thing I that would benefit me is, and maybe someone can do this offline, and I can go research it myself, but how far back how far back does Redfish go down to does the card have to have an IP address and something to connect to in order for Redfish to work? I'm just wondering, the secure ZTP stuff that we've done, is that we're dropping that, we're going with Redfish, or are we putting the two together in some way, shape, or form? I'm not as familiar with Redfish.
You still have to have the secure ZTP, I believe, because so that's actually a good question, Simon. So did you guys discuss?
We didn't go into that detail, but my understand. Let me ask directly. But my feeling is that that Red Hat believes ZSTP is not.
Yeah, you still need SZTP. I think you still need SZTP. If you're not using SZTP, you need IPMI discovery to get an IP address of the BMC before you can do Redfish endpoint discovery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's either IPMI based LAN discovery or you do SZTP, one of those, to get an IP address, and then you can do Redfish.
Yeah, because Redfish is a straight REST API. So you go to a URL, which effectively means you go to an IP address, and then you send it a particular query string in effect. And there are a couple or three that are must be implemented, or you're not Redfish. And from there you can then start enumerating everything, right? It's like SMTP, or you've got to have you have to have a MIB server and a certain number of MIBs before you can use it. Redfish is very much like that, and it's implemented on BMCs all the time. I mean, Dell's BMC implements it, for example. So it's not heavyweight, but you do have to have something running that can provide the Redfish data. Obviously, that's more than just a BIOS.
Got it.
So I'll say likely still need. I'll make this a different thing. So we still need
SZTP or something like it.
Okay. All right, that was good clarification. And complex and you guys obviously think then if the NOS should be essentially out of scope, that a common networking API sitting on top of all the NOSes is right out because you'd have no control over that.
Yes.
Yeah, and the fact that no one's ever been able to do a common NOS API correctly, including OpenConfig, although they're the closest, is maybe should be an indication that's not a solvable problem the way people work, the way people have the industry structure, the way companies work, just reality. Okay. Because I've we've tried 3 or 4 times and I've only ever come up with, well, here's how you express whatever you're doing in a particular way. I mean, SMTP came close enough, and even that ended up being mostly proprietary MIB trees in the end. The same data was there, but it all gets expressed slightly differently. And it should not be true, but it's been true historically, and I haven't seen that changing. So, all right. Telemetry, 3 components to problem, common form, and you guys said telemetry should be
Subsequent.
subsequent. Subsequent. Good. Okay. And then this was our parenthetical.
Mhm.
I'm going to move that. I'm going to move that to its own separate bullet if I can figure out how to do that in this new interface. Of course, this thing works terribly. Okay, I know how to do it, but man, it's so stupid. So they made this look much prettier and didn't actually fix it to work well.
Well, with the joke, that thing drives me crazy.
You can go in and fix it in the raw code. You can go find where that thing is if you search on the words, because the words are obviously in there as text, and where you delete from. Anyway, never mind. Okay, and then break apart. So telemetry 3 components. We should break into first, blah blah blah. And so this one is a first, right?
Think so?
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
And then that one's a first. And then that was it. So it's basically redfish model plus application management. And application management's really a stand-in for defining how to put Kubernetes there. What is application management really a stand-in for from your guys' evaluation? Or What would you like it to mean? What do we actually do?
I thought the discussion was that fleet management was a subsequent thing, that we would focus on how to do whatever we decide is the complete end-to-end workflow. We would do it on one card, and then how to do it on multiple cards in a fleet would be a subsequent thing. And then there was discussion on how far does the full end-to-end thing that we want to show go? Is it, and my conception is that we're talking about physical card installation in a server. How do you do that? How do you cable it? How do you get it power? How do you put the network ports on it? That's the first. Second is, how do you discover it and bring it up securely and give it an IP address? Third is, how do you then do the inventory and firmware update and OS install? And then the fourth would be, how do you put an application on a card that has an OS or a Kubernetes?
Right, but okay.
And the discussion was, do we do 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3, and 4 in our first go round?
Now, so the physical installation recommendation is, out
That
of
we don't include that in scope right now. So that's subsequent.
no,
So
that was don't do it at all, or rather, possibly address it at some indefinite part of the future. Simon?
So, sorry, you mean the
So right now, from your guys' feedback, your recommendation is this
yeah.
with again, this commentary, assuming
Yep.
it won't do more than 2 levels in dent. Is this one and that one, and
Yes.
that's it. And if I go,
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul's points were good. I mean, I would describe it in terms of you provision the system, get the basic networking up and running, and then run some workloads on it, or whatever they are.
oh my God, I just lost all those edits.
Oh no.
The stupid browser restarted. I didn't notice it was going to restart. The browser restarted. I just lost all those edits.
Well, they've been recorded, Joe. So
yeah, they've been recorded. All right.
We can put them back in later.
We can go and copy them off the screen. Okay, it's not much typing. Oh, I hate when that happens. But okay, so I guess we were on. I guess let me share again. I feel like I'm back in the early 70s where Multics would crash randomly, and so you basically got in the habit of saving about every minute or 2 minutes. So that
I'm a little younger than you, but that reminds me of the mid-90s.
yeah. Well, no, I was like 7. I was like 7 doing that stuff, and we used to have. My dad had access to a computer, so I did. Had access to the mainframe system, and when I was playing on it and typing anything in, all the college kids told me, you got to save every couple of minutes because things can just disappear.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, I feel like we've regressed to that point with some of these applications. Okay, so application provisioning. Okay, so it's the Kubernetes, the application and OS configuration, and then breakout app integration of fleet managers.
Yeah, I think the fleet manager part is a later.
Okay. All right. We'll we'll get the notes typed back in. I guess I can pop the video up and go to 7:48 or whatever it was before it crashed. And
I'm happy to assist with that if you prefer, but not until tomorrow.
yeah. But that I mean it's recoverable because of our recording backup.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll get it posted to YouTube as soon as I get a note on it. That
Okay.
it's done on Zoom.
All right, so we'll do that. All right, good feedback. Any other questions or feedback from anyone? And okay,
I guess the feedback would be some logistics about how we ratify these decisions and then you push that to the working groups.
okay, so what I want to do is what I believe we should do is next Thursday we should come back to this topic. Not but take the deck that we've been working on and go through and make a call on first subsequent currently out of scope for each of the items and then lay out the final summary for that and then vote on that's what we're going to do and then begin to then write down what that work means, right? And get volunteers to do it, get people who are interested in doing it, working on it. And then for the subsequent stuff we can then also decide we want to launch one or more of the subsequent things now as well, but with an eye towards the completion is further in the future, and then decide how. And then we need to put a a stake in the ground, a range marker that says when do we expect this to be done, so that we can start planning release announcement and explain to people how to use it, what they get, that all of that sort of thing.
Perfect.
So let's walk through that planning. And again, if other people have feedback or this has prompted them to think, yeah, I have an opinion on that in whatever direction the opinion is, then we can incorporate that information next week as well. And then after that, we should have a plan and get people to sign up. And if we can't get people to sign up, that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will take the discussion back to my team, particularly the Nginx point. Yeah, I'm not sure how responsive they'll be because of summer, but I agree with your plan. It's good.
Okay.
Can you also take back the to possibly just Julia
Yes.
is secure ZTP needed or not?
Yep. I did write that down. I got it.
Yeah, and
then-
if not, then what's the redfish bring up?
Yeah. And I'd be curious as well what your thoughts are on using Ansible to further streamline this in the way that Boris has done in the lab right now, where he's using Ansible to drive redfish.
I would imagine that Red Hat's reaction will be very positive, but I will talk.
I would imagine so as well, but I'm not certain that it's a requirement. So.
Oh, I don't think it's in the first group, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Is it required to make this fully usable, or do we just interact with the redfish APIs?
I would say no, it's not, but I will ask anyway.
Right, but so is it useful though? So is it
Oh, I think it's useful.
Yeah, so we can say, look, here's the way you do this with Ansible. And by the way, here's a published set of playbooks for Ansible.
Yep.
And that's part of the release. You don't have to use Ansible. And then we make the point, you don't have to use Ansible, but if you were to use Ansible, here it all is.
Yep.
And we
Right,
recommend.
but if you phrase it that way, then it's not part of the minimal set, right?
Except that you want to release it at the same time.
I would say
Okay.
you could release it subsequently, but that's just me.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
wait. we can wait
I would-
we can
The
wait
ease of use
five
thing.
minutes.
There's a broader set of people who understand how to use Ansible than understand how to interact with a REST API on their own.
Okay. And yeah, but I mean, there is value in releasing that at the same time and basically saying, look, here's one set of components that are the core, and then here's Ansible that'll let you drive it, and Nginx that you can run on top. So maybe we can think about how we describe this more than the stuff that's actually there, so that people know, oh, I could just use the core part, but here are examples of how I use it, and or something like that. All right, we'll discuss that next time, because we're at our time, and I'll go in and type all the notes in again, because these.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. I was not able to take notes today.
No, yeah, this was because you were talking and whatnot. I was able to take the notes.
I'll
Yeah.
on Slack post when I get the
Yeah,
the
I
video.
know. And like I said, I'll just go. I'll type him in again, and then we can we'll have a set. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week. And
All right, thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
everyone.
we
Have a nice day.
they do that definition. Bye.